That Friday morning, my wife called me in a panic and asked me to urgently come home. I left the family business that my father had left to me and my brother and hurried home, feeling that something had happened. Beth Tate was a housewife and had never worked since we were married. She would never have bothered me at work unless it was serious, so I realized that something important had happened. I was worried that something had happened to one of our teenage daughters at school. I hoped it wasn't as serious as it sounded. Both of our daughters were very athletic, and I thought it might be a sports injury. My daughters were everything to me. They both became very beautiful women, like their mother. We were the largest electrical company in this part of the state. I handled the commercial side, and my brother handled the residential projects. Since we took over, we have more than tripled the size of the business every year for the last 6 years. My mother was very proud of both her sons for keeping her husband's dream alive. Last year, the company earned $5 million in net profit after paying all taxes for the first time in its more than 50-year history. In the 9 years since our father's death, we have built it into a very successful business. I estimated the current value of our father's business at $20 million. Since John was the eldest, our mother made him president after our father died. She was still the majority shareholder and controlled 52% of the shares. My brother and I owned 24% each. My father arranged this so that our mother would be provided for until the end of her days. When my father died, my mother insisted that I take responsibility for her personal investments. With the help of her trusted investment broker, I went from a conservative approach to an aggressive one. This turned out to be very successful for her. I came home to find furniture makers and movers packing items that my wife wanted to move out of our home. Beth was standing by the road next to her newly purchased 2020 model car that I had bought for her with cash. Beth was leaving me forever, and our daughters had already been moved to a new location without my knowledge or permission. She left them at home today so they could move in together, avoiding dating drama with our breakup. I quickly realized that she did this on purpose so that I could not talk to our daughters about the situation. "I'm sorry, James, but I've stopped loving you and am in love with someone else," she said, handing me the divorce papers. "You don't need to know who he is because it doesn't matter since I already filed for divorce." I knew there was no easy way to do this, so my lover and I decided that our last contact as husband and wife should be as short as possible. With these words, she got into her car and drove away. When she left, I witnessed the end of our 17-year-old marriage. Without explanation, it's over. She did it so coldly that I didn't even have time to find out what my daughters thought about the whole situation. The first thing that came to my mind was that she started a relationship with someone she met on the internet. But then the girls would tell me if their mother spent too much time chatting on the internet. This would require some distance, and since it was not yet noon, this was ruled out. Wherever she was, it was a local place. I stood still while two men carried another piece of our daughter's furniture out of the house. Then I realized that they must know where the furniture is delivered. I asked the driver, and he kindly showed me the delivery address. I was in complete shock because it was an address that I knew all too well. I took 320s out of my wallet and told him to spend them on a nice dinner with his wife. I thanked him and asked him to lock the doors when they finished. I drove back to our family business, making one stop along the way to see if what I had been shown was true. What I saw when I made that one stop on the side of the road tore my life apart forever. It wasn't just terrible that she left me. It was even worse because of who she did it for. Beth was a girl who would always tag along with her brother and me wherever we went. Until our early teens, the three of us were inseparable. Her brother was still a good friend, but now he was in the Marines for life. He took the morals, principles, and standards that were instilled in him into his life and applied them to a career that supported them. I was proud of my son-in-law and had deep respect for him. As we grew, our interests began to differ, and we grew apart due to normal life circumstances. As my father's business grew, I spent most of my free time helping him with his growing business. Sometimes I would accept deliveries for the next project he needed to complete. I asked my father why he didn't use his name when he started the family business. He replied, Tate and Sons or its variations are overused, and most of them do not last long. I want this business to continue long after I'm gone. Parrish is your mother's maiden name, and it gives her a spiritual edge. My older brother John, who was 3 years older than me, took me with him when he delivered materials to various construction sites. Because of his age, he received a salary I did not, but I used this time to learn as much as possible. When I finished 10th grade, I went on an apprenticeship program to get my electrician's license while continuing my education online. I completed year 12 before completing my apprenticeship and began a degree in business management at university. It was through these skills and the basic knowledge that I acquired during my education that I helped my father expand and develop his business. On the other hand, John climbed the career ladder the hard way. He learned all aspects of the family business by working and learning better ways of doing things from those he worked with. He also picked up a lot of their bad habits. What separated my brother and I was that I began bidding on and winning small commercial contracts that we completed under budget and saved for our clients. This was an area in which my father and brother knew little. The positive word of mouth about our approach has given us more growth than we could have wished for. Our father always said that I was the brains of the company, and John was the muscles, and only together could we make our business successful. I was 20 years old and living alone when my brother called me one night because he was too drunk to drive home. He was at a wild private party in the middle of nowhere and didn't want to get caught by the cops, so I went to save his worthless ass again. After I loaded him drunk into the back seat of the car, a voice behind me said, James, can I come with you? My boyfriend is somewhere unconscious, and if I don't come home, my father will kill me. Beth's father was a strict old Christian conservative with liberal views as long as they did not conflict with his beliefs or his interpretation of the Bible. I turned towards the voice and found a new Beth. At 18, she grew into a very beautiful young girl. Her bright blue eyes were mesmerizing, she had a smile that was irresistible, and she seemed relieved to have found someone she felt safe with. She had an hourglass figure that attracted men the way honey attracts bees. I could just stand and stare at her all night. Her parents were very protective of her, and I knew she would get in trouble if her dad found out where she was, so I agreed to give her a ride home. Her father was waiting for her when we arrived. I stopped at the edge of the road to hide a snoring drunk who was sleeping in the back seat. I walked around the car and helped her out, then walked with her to the door. Her father, already angry due to concern for his daughter, opened the door, ready to scold her boyfriend for being late, but saw that it was me. Damn it, Beth, if you had said that your boyfriend was James, I wouldn't have worried. A week later, she came to see me in my father's workshop at the end of the working day. I was getting the truck ready for the next day. Beth came to ask me to accompany her to her prom, which was still 2 months away. I said I'd think about it and offered to give her a ride home. We ate dinner at a restaurant after visiting her parents to make sure it wasn't against their rules since it was a school night. It took her most of the night to convince me that she was interested in me. 2 more weeks for me to start taking her seriously. On the night of her prom, we agreed to be a couple. That's how it all started, and now our marriage has come to an end. About 20 minutes later, I parked at our head office. A few minutes later, I headed to John Tate's office, being a very angry but determined person. But the door was closed, so I asked his secretary if my older brother was there. She said that he was in his office, talking on the phone with some woman, but the door was locked. He wanted privacy because it was something personal. Mary, I said, could you come with me to my brother's office? I need a witness for what I'm about to say. Mary looked at my face and knew that what I was about to say was very important because the anger on my face was obvious. She answered, of course. As soon as she was nearby, I shocked her by kicking down the door and rushing inside. John looked up in surprise when we entered and quickly ended the conversation without saying goodbye. He turned off his mobile phone. For the first time in a long time, I had his full attention. You need to evaluate this business and find a way to buy out my shares. You have as long as my divorce takes. John, are you smart enough to understand this? I said in rage. Mary's jaw dropped. She had never heard me raise my voice in my life. What the hell is going on here? Asked John. The movers gave me the address where they deliver the things Beth wanted to move, I said. I saw my daughters coming out of their new house to talk to her when she drove up. John just stood there silently, trying to figure out what to do with me. I knew they didn't want me to know about it. It wasn't intentional, John said, without an ounce of regret, looking at me coldly. She's just living with me until she finds a place for herself. I'm sorry, we both know that's a damn lie because she told me she was moving in with the man she fell in love with. For me, I said, she said I shouldn't know his name because it's none of my damn business what she does with her life anymore since she just served me the divorce papers. It was sad to see my older brother's face turn white. I saw that this damn coward couldn't tell the truth. Mary's face turned pale. She knew John Tate would sleep with any woman, but she never expected him to stoop to stealing his brother's wife. Rumors claimed that he was treated for diseases more than once. How long have you been lovers? I asked. On those days when I had to cover for you, you went to my house and slept with her, like with all those women you could reach. Guess I'll have to get tested for diseases now because I saw some of the people you slept with. John's face paled, and he said quietly, I don't think work is the time or place to discuss this. Fuck you. There will never be a good time for this, John, I said angrily. Better go to the bank and start talking to managers or put the business up for sale. We are no longer business partners or brothers, at least for me. James, there must be another option. We can't afford to lose you, John said. We should discuss this when you calm down. Furious, I picked up the phone on his desk and dialed our mother's number, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear the conversation. Luckily, she was not on charity work and responded immediately. Mom, I'm afraid I have bad news for you, I said, almost furious. Today is my last day. I am leaving the family company from today. I already told John this morning that he needs to find a way to buy back my shares as soon as possible. What? Mom said in shock. You love this business and always have. You are the anchor that made him what he is today. It is your vision of his future that drives you. What happened to make you make this decision? I think you'd better have your other son answer that question when you find him, because he's not in his office right now. Perhaps he is at home because his secret lover is moving in with him today. I understand they are going to get married as soon as her divorce is finalized, I said. He's probably with her right now, expressing his love and support. I'm sure you'll be glad to see him finally settle down with a woman who already has children, because it means he's finally starting to grow up, I said, starting to calm down. Now I suggest you go to him and proudly introduce yourself to the beautiful lady he has been bragging about for months as his future mother-in-law. I hung up. John's face was furious. He couldn't say anything because he had spent months bragging about the woman he loved at his mom's family dinners. From the look of him, I realized that if we were not here, he would have tried to attack me. Mary, can you come with me to my office and make sure I don't take anything that belongs to the company? I don't want anyone to be able to say that I was fired because I'm a thief, I said. I need a signed document that I handed over all the keys in my possession to you and that I left with only what we agreed was not the property of the company. John was getting angrier because I was telling everyone on the staff that I expected the worst from him. Before leaving his office, I said, should I walk away backwards so you don't have the opportunity to stab me in the back again? John, given what you and Beth did, it would be better if you just took one of your dad's guns and shot me. We went back to my office where my secretary was working, and I said, Joan, could you come in and witness what's about to happen? I think Mary would appreciate having a witness. James, what's going on? Joan asked. I quit because John stole my wife and my children from me, I said. I was called home to serve divorce papers. The trucks carrying what Beth wanted to pick up gave me the address where they delivered the items, and to my surprise, it was my brother's house. Our longtime executive assistants were in complete shock. These wonderful women have been our pillars of support for years. They knew that I loved and respected them very much. Let's write down everything that James takes, Mary said, and also what keys he will give us. We will print and certify all this. Let's make 5 copies. Joanne and I will each take a copy home for safekeeping, so that if the ones here disappear, we can confirm what happened. This simple statement showed me how much they trusted the company president. This made me wonder what else my older brother was hiding. It took us an hour to finish everything. I called security to escort me out and make sure I was only bringing out my things. I watched as both ladies placed additional copies in their bags. My brother hurriedly left without saying goodbye, hoping to find a way to escape the drama that was probably unfolding in his home. I later found out that he came home too late. Everyone saw how I, accompanied by our security guards, was seen off by 2 senior executive assistants with tears in their eyes. At the front door, before leaving, I kissed both ladies on the cheek and thanked them for their years of support. I walked out the door and took the box from the guard's hands. As soon as I came out, everyone wanted to know what happened. The women explained that they knew. Opening the trunk, I threw the box in and closed it. Driving through town, I stopped at a real estate agency and put the house up for sale. I gave the representative my wife's cell phone number and told her she would need to sign the paperwork. I told her I would leave the decision on the starting price to her. When I returned home, I discovered that, in addition to their personal belongings, only our daughter's bedrooms had been taken out. After that, I turned off my mobile phone. I took out the divorce papers and read them. The grounds were emotional and mental abuse and other nonsense. She asked for primary custody of our daughters Bijou and Bree, offering me supervised visits once a month for an hour only. Beth felt that I was too strict with our daughters because I did not allow them, as girls of 13 and 15, to date boys their age unaccompanied. This was one of her stupid reasons for divorce. She thought my views were too old-fashioned for our time. My morals and standards were too restrictive for our society. When we argued about this, I told her that I didn't want our daughters to ruin their lives by getting into early relationships. As a result, Beth felt that my views on family structure were detrimental to their personal development. I knew that she believed that I treated our daughters the same way her father treated her at that age, and she always tried to rebel against him growing up. Beth got under my skin because of our different views on raising our daughters. I walked over to the bar and poured myself a strong drink. I flipped through the channels, looking for something to take my mind off things, but found nothing but outdated reruns in our modern world. Star Wars, sex, and the city or law and order didn't suit my taste preferences. I must have passed out drunk because I woke up with a hangover, lying on the living room couch, still in my business suit. I went upstairs, undressed, showered, and shaved to get ready for the day. After I made myself breakfast, I went outside and went about my usual Saturday morning routine. It was around 1 p.m. when I turned on my cell phone again. I received text messages from my mother, my brother, my wife, and my 2 daughters, all trying to contact me for their own selfish reasons. I believed that my daughters knew what was happening and agreed to go with their mother. The only message I believed was from my mother. In my state at that time, the rest of the messages did not matter. I just finished listening to them and deleted all the voicemail messages they left asking me to contact them to start solving problems. In her message, my wife said that I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing and that we could come to some kind of agreement once I thought it through and calmed down. And then the realtor called. "Mr. Tate, your wife finally came this morning, but she was not in a good mood," Miss Waterston said. "She was shocked that you were selling everything in the house along with him." I showed her comparisons of other homes in the area, and she agreed to add $20,000 because of the value of the furniture. "Thank you for giving me this information," I said. "I want the house to be sold as soon as possible because there are too many memories in it." "Just so you know, she started crying because she didn't expect you to do what you did," she said. I asked her, "What did you expect him to do? You left him for his brother." "I was expecting to sell the house," your wife said, but there is no demand to buy out a share of the family business. I told her, "What choice did you leave him? In your eyes, he should have been happy that his brother was a cuckold, and now his girlfriend for the rest of your days. I've never seen it like this." "I just wanted to get away from them forever," I said. "In the divorce suit, she is trying to completely take my children away from me." Apparently, she didn't see it that way either. Judging by her face, I thought she was going to puke. She said she had never seen this. I told her she might fool a lot of people, but I know how women like you think, Miss Waterston said. "I made an appointment with my sister. She's a damn good divorce lawyer for you on Monday. I'll send you a text message with her name and office address when I finish the call." I thanked her for her kindness and hung up. I had just refreshed my cup of coffee when I saw my older sister's car approaching the driveway. So I finished my coffee and walked to the front door to let her in. Mom must have called her after she drove to my brother's house. It was an 8-hour drive from their place to here. "This must be something important," I said, "since you've driven halfway through the state." Connie looked at me and said, "I can't believe what they did." Mom was completely devastated when she arrived at John's house and saw Beth and your daughters there, setting up their daily routine. "What are they thinking? Do you think you're in shock?" "Look at it from my side," I said, with eyes filled with tears. "I didn't have the slightest idea. Do you know how long this went on?" "According to Mom, after talking to Beth yesterday, before John came home," my sister said, "about 2 years." "Damn, how could I be so blind?" I said. "Before we continue, you should read the divorce papers and understand why she wants a divorce." "I just made some fresh coffee. I'll bring you a cup and we can talk." Connie read everything carefully. Everything was described in great detail, and small quarrels were blown out of proportion. Everything was exaggerated to the extreme. "Beth wants you out of her daughters' lives," Connie noted. "Most of what she claims is nonsense. We both know it. I'm here because Mom doesn't want you to leave the family business. So Mom wants me to come to terms with the fact that I'm a cuckold and accept my new role as him for the rest of my life," I said. "Did I understand correctly?" I thanked the real estate agent for pointing this out because Connie was now in complete shock. I could tell from the look on her face that she realized the significance of my words because they clearly showed how little my older brother thought of me. "Oh my God," Connie swore. I chuckled because my older sister had never uttered rude words in her life. Like a good Christian, she said bananas instead of 4-letter words when she was angry. "How will I explain this to our mother?" Connie asked. "With her Christian views, she will never understand what they really did. The shame they impose on you is disgusting. She will see the cheating, the breakdown of your marriage, and how they are trying to take your children away from you, but not this." "That's why I'm leaving the company," I said. "Whatever deal is made, I will always feel like he is laughing in my face because he was so easy to turn my wife and children against me. The only reason he's taking what's mine is because he didn't have the courage to build his own family, so he took mine to maintain his position in the eyes of our mother. Let your husband find someone to sell the company. Our brother left you no choice." "You have to cut him out of your life," Connie said. "He knew what he was doing, and it was intentional. Our brother is a scoundrel, and that's the kindest thing I can say." Connie called her husband, and I listened to her explain the whole situation. When she finished the call, she said, "He will send a team to value the company at market value on Monday morning. Now all I have to do is convince our mother that this is the best decision for all of us." I went to my home office, took out the financial statements for the last 5 years, and placed the folder in front of her. "These are corporate records and tax returns for the last 5 years. Your husband will need them," I said. "What about Bijou and Bree?" Connie asked. "It all depends on what Judge Donald MacDonald decides. I would turn to Dale Brittain, but he is busy with a right-to-life case and is not accepting new cases. Her lawyer paints a pretty ugly picture." Connie and I talked for a few more minutes before she left to have a long conversation with our mother. I didn't sleep well that night because I was used to sleeping next to my wife. Then I decided that after visiting a lawyer, I would leave the city for a few days. I had to distance myself from the situation in order to be able to look at it rationally. Connie called me after a long conversation with her mom and the pastor after Sunday service. The pastor said those who were harmed the most may never recover from it. What they did to him was disgusting, but in our society it has become the norm because love and decency have lost their moral value. For many, they have become just tools of manipulation and control. Love is just 4 letters unless a person's long-term behavior proves what it means. My mother was obviously surprised when the pastor said that your son James was not the first to have his life ruined by a family who claimed to love him, and he would not be the last. Mom agreed to sell the entire business, Connie explained, not because of what John did, but because she knows that without you, John will ruin him. She wants to know who to appoint in your place. Does she understand that John is now dead to me? I asked. Yes, and why? Connie said. I had to explain to my mother what a cuckold means in the eyes of society and what this label implies about a person. Mom swore that if she saw Beth again, she would kill her. Tell your mom she needs to name Carl Robertson president. He was my deputy and knows everything I know. If she doesn't, John can and will outmaneuver him. The commercial direction will always bring us a lot of money. To get the best price for the company, you need to do this. Connie needs to do this personally and demote John to vice president by making a public announcement in the newspaper about the changes. Should John be warned in advance? Connie asked. No, and if Mom doesn't feel like she can do it, I said, she'll have to make you CEO for a year or until the company is sold. You should understand why I should stay away. I can't afford to get involved because it will be used against me in divorce court to support Beth's claims. Connie said she would check with her husband to see if my logic was correct. She also said that she faxed all the corporate documents to him last night. About 2 hours later, Connie texted me, I'm the new CEO. Tomorrow morning, I'll do as you suggested. I had breakfast around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I cooked potatoes, eggs, and bacon. When Beth called me, this time I answered. Can we talk? Beth asked. We just talked. If your lover or you contact me again, I will file a harassment report, I said. Everything that remains will be decided in court. We need to talk about Bijou and Bree, Beth said, and start working things out. Now that you have calmed down, there is no reason for you to leave the family business. Oh, we'll deal with this on my terms, not yours, I said coldly. I will go to court to get paternity tests done to prove whether their father is my brother or me. I think we all have a right to know the truth, and no, I will never go back to anything related to him. Beth gasped in shock and said, They're yours and you know it. I believed I had a loving wife until I came home on Friday, and let's see how wrong I was, I said. So based on the new truths I'm learning to live with, I have to assume that there's a very good chance that I'm not actually the father. After all, we both know that John could sleep with you for years behind my back, and it gave him pleasure because I was a big fool who paid for it. After all, John is willing to sleep with anyone if it doesn't cost him anything. Beth began to sob, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I just hung up. Just in case, I called my former executive assistant, Joanne. Her husband went through a terrible divorce from his first wife many years ago. Sorry to bother you, I said, but I really need your husband's advice about what I'm facing. Let me talk to David, she said. Wait a second. I waited, and when she returned, she said, David is on his way. About half an hour later, David appeared. I let him read the divorce papers, then told him everything that had happened since Friday. Let's get this straight, David said. Do you have any idea when the affair began, other than what you heard from third parties? It's true, and I heard it from third parties who spoke directly to someone who spoke to Beth, I said. Then, from the court's point of view, you will be justified, given the family situation, by asking for proof of paternity before moving forward, David said. The way you found out who her lover was implies deliberate long-term deception on their part towards you. Judge Donald McDonald will require biological evidence before making any decisions. The judge insists on the facts, not on personal beliefs and perceptions. Is the judge really that strict? I asked. Yes, it took me 6 months to finalize my divorce, but I can honestly say that when it was over, neither of us were happy with his decision, David explained, because he put our children's needs first. Honestly, I now have to say that his final decision was the right one. I offered David a stiff drink, and we were sitting talking about his relationship with Joanne when we heard a truck pull up to the house. I stood up and looked out the living room window to see that it was my brother John. Damn it, that bastard dared to come here after what he did to me, I said. I wish I had one of my father's 22s in the house. David said, sit down, I'll go talk to him, and if he doesn't leave, I'll show him my badge. I don't think he wants to deal with the Cape Girardeau police. He opened the front door and rolled down the window on the screen door so I could hear their conversation before heading outside. After slamming his truck door in anger, John shouted, "Where the hell is my stupid brother?" I told him we could sit down and discuss everything. But that asshole didn't listen, and now he should, because I have a few things I want to clear up with him right now. If he doesn't listen, I'll shove my fist down his throat until he starts. No, David said, you need to go home and cool off before you do something you later regret. Fuck you, bastard. Get out of the way. I left Beth in tears because he was questioning the paternity of his daughters, John said. He needs to clear this up, and I'm the one to do it. When did the romance begin? Asked David. About 5 years ago, if that matters to you, John replied. Interesting, because Beth told your mother yesterday at your house that it was 2 years ago, David said, showing his badge. I have to wonder what the truth is, because it is obvious that you both, by your own statements, are making each other out to be liars. I saw John's face go white as David continued. So after you made James an unknowing cuckold with your affair and your behavior, your brother James had to accept it and carry on as if nothing had happened. Am I understanding Beth's thoughts and yours correctly? Did you plan to gradually break him down and turn him into your personal humble servant? What gives you the right to think that your little brother should do what you tell him? John was stunned. He didn't know what to say. This showed me that he and Beth had not sat down together to truly discuss the entire situation. David continued, I wonder what the judge will say when I show him the video recording of our conversation. I suggest you get in the truck and prepare Beth for the paternity tests that will be conducted, David said. This is necessary because we can now confirm that your explanations about your relationship have no credibility, and any explanation you give will be just another lie aimed at mitigating the situation. I watched my brother walk back to the truck, realizing that things weren't going the way they had planned. David waited until he left before returning to the house. What is the name of your lawyer? He asked. I will contact her on Monday and send her a copy of this video. I opened my text messages, and he copied the lawyer's name and phone number for his information. Why did you bring your police camera? I asked. This is common practice in all cases of domestic violence, David explained. When Joan told me why you wanted to talk to me, I realized that anything could happen in a short time, so I came prepared. Tell Joanne that after the meeting with the lawyer, I will leave town, I said. I think it's best if I stay away for a while because of what's going to happen tomorrow. Is this something that might get the police called? Asked David. My older sister was appointed CEO of the family company this morning. Tomorrow, she will appoint Carl Robertson as president, I said. He was my deputy. Joan worked as closely with him as she did with me and will likely become his executive assistant. The current president, my brother, will be demoted to vice president. Why is this happening? Asked David. My mother doesn't want my brother to destroy what she knows my father and I built, I said, before she finds a buyer for the company. Then I agree with your logic, David said. If I were you, I would pack my things and leave immediately after meeting with the lawyer. John will be furious because he will see your hand in this. From what I have learned about your brother, he has a short temper and acts without thinking. Such idiots are capable of anything. After David left, I cleaned out the kitchen, then went to Ace Hardware and bought new locks for all the doors. It took me about 2 hours to install. I was about to change my home security code when my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen and got ready. It was Beth's father. "What's going on, James?" he asked. "My granddaughters called me from an unknown number because Beth confiscated their phones, and your phone is always busy." "Did you ask Beth why?" I asked. "I tried, but everything she says is something personal that she will explain to us later," he said. "Katie and I are tired of this. We want answers now." "Beth moved out on Friday," I said. "She called me from work when the movers were finishing and handed me the divorce papers. She said she fell out of love with me and fell in love with another man, and his name didn't matter." "Are you serious, James?" my father-in-law asked quietly. "I'm afraid so," I explained. "The movers gave me her new address because your daughter couldn't be honest with me. The man she moved in with is my older brother. According to the family, their relationship lasts between 2 and 5 years, depending on which one you ask. My intuition tells me that this goes on much longer. Beth doesn't want me hanging out with Bijou and Bree. In her divorce suit, she demands that I be allowed to see them under supervision once a month for only an hour." "Why does she want to do this?" he asked. "You were one of the best fathers I've ever seen." "I think she doesn't believe I'm the biological father of her children," I said. "That's why my lawyer, when we're in court, will ask for a DNA test to find out the truth. For your information, I am no longer involved in the family business." "I think she already knows who their real dad is," Beth's father said. "If that's the case, we can assume she's been lying to us her whole life." "What should I tell my granddaughters when they call again?" "What they and I haven't received from their mother for a long time," I said. "The truth." Once we said our goodbyes, I went back to work changing codes. Then I decided to go out to eat and went to Golden Corral. It was already about 11 in the morning when I left the lawyer's office. She agreed, as did I, that it was a complete mess. David sent her a videotape, which she considered explosive, as it would make the judge doubt the plaintiff's veracity. My lawyer believed that because of their stupidity, they had put me in an advantageous position. I just left the bank after canceling all debit and credit cards in my wife's name. She was also removed from all bank accounts. My next stop was the real estate agency to give her the access code and a new house key. This was over. I went south. After driving for about an hour, Joanne called me. "Just wanted to make sure you were on your way," Joan said. "Connie just came in and is heading to Carl Robertson's office." "I left about an hour ago after leaving the keys to the house with the realtor," I said. "I'm moving south without a specific direction." "I'll call you later to let you know how it went," Joan said. "Send me a message so I can pull over," I said before saying goodbye. I drove on until I found the next rest area. Finally, being away from it all, I gave vent to my emotions. Luckily, it was in the middle of the day and no one else was driving up. I don't know how long I spent at the stop, but I eventually got out to stretch my legs and walk around the area. When I returned to the car, a police patrol arrived. He stopped next to me and left. "I was sitting on the other side of the highway, watching for speeders when you pulled up," the officer said. "After 2 hours, I decided it was better to come over and check if everything was okay. To be honest, I just went through 4 long days of emotional turmoil," I said. "It decided to come out, so I decided it was better not to drive." "The beginning of an unexpected divorce?" he asked with a smile. "Yes, how did you guess?" I asked. "The road to the south, without a specific direction, seems to come to every man's mind," he said with a smile. He opened the trunk and took 2 cold bottles of Coca-Cola out of the refrigerator, offering one to me. We were still talking when the message arrived. "Do you need privacy?" he asked as we stood there. "No, but you might be interested in hearing what they say now, because I'm going to find out what happened to my wife's lover's work," I said. The message warned me so I could find a place to stop. As soon as the call came in, I answered and put it on speakerphone. How did it go, Joanne? Carl Robertson temporarily accepted the position of president after he learned that it was you who proposed it, Joan said. Together with Connie, they entered John's office and informed him of his removal. John took this poorly and resigned from the position of vice president. Carl then said with a smile, "I think you have decided to quit. Let me call security to get you out." John kept swearing and cursing you because he felt it was your doing. So my brother lost his job and joined the ranks of the unemployed like me, I said. Oh, for John, this must really hurt his pride. Unofficially, James, from what I've heard, this was Connie and your mother's plan all along, Joan said. We have to go. Wait for a call from Connie. The policeman saw a big smile on my face as I began to explain. My wife left me for my brother last Friday. I resigned as vice president of my family's privately held company that same day and demanded that they buy back my shares. They didn't expect this. I had just finished explaining the whole situation when Connie called and I put it on speaker. Hey, when can you come back? Connie asked. For what? From what I heard, you have everything under control, I said. You don't need me. Carl is the right man for the job. Smart guy, you don't understand anything, she said. My husband spent the whole weekend arranging financing so you could buy out your brother's shares. Our mother wants him to leave. He will use a business loan for this. So come back so Carl can take the position of vice president, which he only accepted on the condition that you return as president. Sister, I will meet you at my mother's house around 6 in the evening, I said. Is it soon enough? Tell Joanne to order new office furniture for my new office and for the office that matches her new position as my executive assistant. Let her clean the rooms and paint them. Let her choose the colors, since she knows me well. I'll give her a 10% raise when I see her in the morning. Having said this, we said goodbye. There was a big smile on my face. What is the name of your company? Asked the officer. Parish Electrical, I said. We cover about a third of the state and are constantly expanding. Your slogan is, no job is too big or too small, he said. That's right, it was my father's favorite phrase, so we adopted it as our motto many years ago, I said, and I personally still stand by it. We talked for a few more minutes, then he gave me his business card, and before we parted, he told me where the next turn was so I could turn around. He followed me until I got onto the road. I was grateful for the friendship the police officer showed me that day, and having found a place to turn around, I turned as he advised and drove back. Back in town, I looked at his business card. It showed the branch, its location, and its mobile phone number. I took the card and put it in my wallet for safekeeping. It was about 5:30 when I arrived at my parents' house. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. Before I even reached the door, my mother was already waiting for me. We didn't say a word, we just hugged and shared a warm moment. I learned that Connie went to the airport to meet her husband, who had arrived. He wanted to discuss with me his plans to buy out John's shares. My father was smart to organize everything because we couldn't sell our shares without the approval of the other two shareholders. Mom and I had a good talk before my cell phone rang. It was Beth's dad. Hi, Dad, I said. What's happened? Have you heard the rumors that are circulating among the workers in this part of the state about your brother? He asked. Let me go into the other room before I answer, I said, leaving the room where my mother and I were. Okay, now I can talk, and yes, I heard, I said. But to be honest, I've never seen anything that could confirm them. Why? He has a lot of prohibited videos on his home computer, he said. Bijou and Bree discovered this last night and called us. They are rightfully afraid to be in the same room with him. We picked them up at school, and I don't know what to do. Call Joanna and tell her what the children have told you, and tell her that you are providing shelter for the children until it is confirmed that they are not in danger of being exposed to someone who may be a criminal. No way, it's time for you to reveal your name and not use your own phone. Go buy one of these for $20. So there will be no school for a few days, and we will have to hide them, he said. But why would I call Joanna? She works for me and her husband is a policeman, I said. The first person she will call will be her husband. Then we will, thank you. I am indebted to you for supporting my daughters. Send me her number to their grandmother's phone and I'll go do it, he said. I'll let you talk to your daughters. I was still talking to them half an hour later when my mother came in and said the police were here and wanted to talk to me. I told my girls I had to go. I hung up and sent the number to my mother-in-law's cell phone. Before I went into the other room, I cleared all my text messages. David, good to see you, I said. What can I do for you? I came here to see if your mother knows where you are. Your daughters were missing and your phone was busy every time I called, he said. Beth has filed a formal complaint accusing you of kidnapping his own daughters. I looked at my mother, whose face showed great concern. Well, David, I'm glad to clear this up. What time did my daughters disappear? I asked. Right after the closing bell at 2:30 this afternoon, David said. I reached into my wallet, handed him my state trooper ID, and said, Call him right now. I think it would be better if you find out for yourself how I know him. I watched as David called him. My mother came up to me. I hugged her lovingly. She knew it didn't bother me. She heard David's side of the conversation and saw a wide smile appear on his face as he ended the call. I should have known, David said. You have a perfect alibi. At the time of their disappearance, you were drinking a cold Coca-Cola and talking about your problems an hour away with one of our fellow police officers. At this point, David received 5 text notifications in a row, so he looked at his cell phone and said, Sorry, I need to call someone. I'll be right back. David went outside, returned a few minutes later, and asked to speak to me alone. We entered the room I had just left, and I closed the door, ensuring our privacy. What do you know about the rumors in the yard about your older brother? He asked. Most men have talked about it, I said. Ever since I started dating, I kept my girlfriends as far away from him as possible because even though I never saw anything, I had my suspicions, so I played it safe. Why do you ask? It appears your daughters found something on your brother's home computer that they shouldn't have, and it scared them, he said. They told someone at the school, and they were granted asylum until we could fully investigate it. David walked over to where I was sitting and whispered, Tell whoever is protecting your daughters that we will not charge them, but I will need a few days to solve this problem. Your mistake was that you gave them my wife's number. My wife found out that he called you an hour ago and asked what they should do. They're Beth's parents. I had no idea, I said. But I told them to buy a burner phone to call your wife. David laughed and said, Be grateful that you have in-laws who care so much about you. I'll go to the judge in the morning for a search warrant to search your brother's computer. Let him know that I may need your daughters to tell the judge what they saw. We returned to the living room, and then I escorted the 2 officers to the front door. As soon as I opened the door, Beth came in. Are you arresting James for kidnapping? She asked. Not now, David said. You'll soon have an unbreakable alibi. He was sitting with the policeman and talking about you when your children disappeared. Beth's face turned pale. She was so sure that they would be with me. I think maybe the girls ran away because they don't want to live with you, Beth, I said. David, do you think I should go home in case they show up? I think this is the smartest idea I've heard all day. After all, they're old enough to decide who they want to live with, David said with a big grin. Anyway, the only thing keeping you from your children is their mother. Just call me if they show up. I watched the cop drive away before turning to Beth and saying, The night I dropped you off at home, when I picked up my brother because he was drunk. Was he your boyfriend? The look on Beth's face showed it all, so I added, I think now I know how long you've been sleeping with him behind my back, don't you? My mother screamed in rage, James, throw that woman out of my house right now and let her know that if I ever see her again, I will use one of my dead husband's rifles and put a bullet between her eyes myself. I looked at Beth and said, if I were you, I'd run away. She just might change her mind and kill you right now. I've never seen Beth so scared in my life. I think it took her 10 seconds to get to her car. I couldn't help it. but I burst out laughing as she left in a hurry. "Well played, Mom," I said. "She really believes it." "She's better because I meant it," she replied. I opened my cell phone and called Beth's father. "Dad, can you bring Mom and the kids to my mother's for dinner?" "Are you serious?" he asked. "We're going to celebrate my daughters being welcomed back into the family," I said. "There will be no problems with Beth or the police in the future." "We're on our way," he said. "Mom, the girls will have to stay here until I buy furniture. Do you agree?" I asked. "Why don't you all move here, at least until the whole divorce is finalized?" Mom said. "This way, you can be free from reminders of the harm that Paige hurt you all. I can drop them off and pick them up from school, but tomorrow I'll take them to the store for new clothes." "Sounds like a deal to me," I said, leaning over and hugging her. "Be sure to buy them new mobile phones. Beth took them when she moved them to John's house, so they couldn't contact me." Mom went into the kitchen to tell the cooks that 4 more would be joining us for dinner at 8. I got out, took my suitcases out of the car, and brought the suits that were hanging on me. Mom told me which bedroom would be mine, and I took my things to that room. Beth was not a happy person. She was very worried about her daughters. She was sure that James had kidnapped them. She had been rudely proven wrong, and now her true relationship with John was fully exposed. It was John who was her first man before James, and she was reunited with him. John left them alone once they started to reconnect. It was only after the birth of her second daughter that John decided that he needed to take back what he had always considered his. She resisted his attempts to enter into a relationship for a long time. It was on a Wednesday afternoon when both girls were in elementary school, and he showed up at their house right after lunch. James left town on a business trip. She let him in. "Beth," John said, "I have always loved you and will always love you." About 6 months ago, after nearly getting caught by her eldest daughter, John decided it was time for the two of them to publicly acknowledge their emotional connection, having moved in together. They were so sure that James, a quiet man, would accept their relationship, and after a few difficult months, everything would work out. Lord, if only they knew how wrong they were. He was the complete opposite. He caused a storm that no one saw coming by resigning the way he did. Now he questioned the paternity of his daughters. John came home this afternoon to tell her that he had been kicked out of his own company by the new CEO, his own sister. He then left to talk to a corporate lawyer to see what he could do about it legally. It was the real estate broker to whom James listed his house for sale that made John and her realize what they had unintentionally done to James. They ruined his life and turned everything he believed in into a lie. Now they faced the consequences of their behavior and the hatred it generated. They had never seen him labeled as a cuckold. Hell, they didn't even know what it meant until they looked it up. Society's opinion implied that most cuckolds were not real men in the eyes of the world, but someone who was created to submit to another as if they were his property. For James, this was the greatest insult. They will never be forgiven for this. Now even her parents refused to answer her calls. She called them 5 times to see if they had heard anything from their granddaughters. Even her text messages were not answered. She wondered what they knew. Beth knew she had to find a way to bridge the huge gap between her and James. They needed to start discussing all this. She picked up the phone and called him to see if he had heard anything about their daughters. He answered on the 3rd ring. "James, have you heard anything about the children?" she asked. "No, I haven't," he said. Beth ended the call and sat in her car, crying her eyes out. James had just cruelly pointed out how he likely saw John and her relationship. James had already made it clear that this was his greatest fear, that his daughters will become simple women of easy virtue. That's why he said what he did, because John, until he was reunited with her, was known for always keeping women of easy virtue in his arms. According to James, John had just moved the largest one ever into his home. She was ashamed. She felt used and belonged in a way she had never felt before. It was then that she realized how different the 2 men she loved were. One wanted her to be better, in a life filled with quality and love, and the other, who was his reflection, wanted her to look and act like a lady, but was ready for anything. To become what John wanted her to be in a relationship, she sold the morals and beliefs she grew up with, and now everyone knew it. She turned it into her lifestyle. It was a celebration at my mother's house because my teenage daughters couldn't stay away from me. Beth's parents and I didn't say a word, but we all hugged a lot. It was a very difficult 4 days for all of us. The girls were delighted to meet Aunt Connie and Uncle Tom. During lunch, we told the girls about our temporary plans until the divorce was finalized. They were both happy. Given what is happening, we decided to leave the discussion of business issues until tomorrow. Beth's father and I walked around the property to talk privately. "James, how long has my daughter and your brother been in a relationship?" he asked. "From what I've learned, they've been together off and on since the first time I brought her home from my brother's wild party." Beth admitted that John was her date that night. My father-in-law's eyes filled with tears, and he answered in a trembling voice, "Then why did Beth start chasing you?" "I think John and Beth weren't serious about each other back then," I said. "That night showed me in a different light. The first few years of married life were good. I think John started wanting what I had and started chasing her." "John has always been the more aggressive of the two of you," Beth's father noted. "He was angry that everything was fine in your personal life. Your father told me a long time ago that John always tried to live up to your standards because they were very high." "I didn't know that," I said. "It's sad that John pulled Beth down with him in his fall. Police seized his computer this week. If it has what we think it has, Beth will get what she wanted to give me control over meetings with her daughters." "After what she did," Beth's father said, "she deserves it. Some must learn from their mistakes, and they reap what they sow." I was late to the office on Tuesday morning because I was selfish. I enjoyed being reunited with my beautiful daughters. My mother was beaming with joy because it had been a long time since she had spent a girls' day with her granddaughters. When I walked into our main office, employees lined up and cheered. Carl Robertson stood at the end of the line with Mary and Joan next to him. All three shook my hand. I told Carl that once the president's office was refurbished and set up, we would also refurbish the vice president's office at his request. That morning, an announcement appeared in the business section of the daily newspaper announcing my appointment as president and Carl's promotion to vice president, since John Tate was no longer associated with the organization. That's when the calls started. Both Carl and I were inundated with new business proposals. Joan and Mary learned that most of them were due to the fact that John was no longer associated with the company. He didn't seem particularly liked. It made me wonder how much business he had cost the firm over the years. I left the office that day to pick up the rest of my belongings from my former home. I called my mom and found out they were still in the store. I had been there for about half an hour and was loading the trunk of the car when I was attacked from behind. The older brother appeared. The last time we fought, he beat me up pretty bad. I think a neighbor saw this and called the police, who came to separate us. Neither of us were in the best shape by then, but at least I was standing. The police noticed that John was drunk. Being the aggressor, he was arrested. I lost consciousness and woke up in the hospital. My mother said I looked like the characters from the movie Soylent Green. John was charged with aggravated assault. My daughters were emotionally upset about the way I looked and what happened. "Bijou and Bree, what happened to me was because your mother and your uncle acted on their emotions because they couldn't control them. People who are controlled by their emotions lose the ability to see things logically," I said. "This causes them to end up making their situation worse. I will recover, but with the long-term damage they inflict on themselves, they may not recover." The girls and my mother stayed with me until I fell asleep. The next morning, Connie, Mom, and Tom came to the hospital. To get the loan Tom wanted, we had to agree to expand upstate. It seems that one of our competitors in the north was experiencing financial difficulties and could not find the necessary funds. As a result, they filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The company was liquidated because its debts significantly exceeded the value of all assets. Tom suggested that we take over all of their existing contracts and make a low bid on all of their existing equipment and buildings. I said, why don't we just buy a majority stake? Tom explained that their debt load was too high, and then we would be faced with their union contracts, which were loaded with high pensions and health care obligations, which would ultimately put us in the same boat. Mom then surprised us all by saying, James was actually the president of the company for many years. We all know this. When Jacob was alive, James carried the brunt of the burden, and he knew it. Even though James communicated with him daily to keep him informed and get his approval, it was James who ran things. Tom, I want to give James the 27% of the shares needed for complete control because we cannot guarantee that John will agree to sell. I give the rest to Connie. We all know that I have enough, thanks to James's wisdom in managing my investments, to live comfortably for the rest of my days, she said. Anyone against it? I'm against it, I said. If we are going to make such a big move, I will only agree to all of this if Tom finally takes over as our CFO. I know it might be a hit to his salary, but it's a sacrifice he'll have to accept. Connie teared up because our father had never truly accepted Tom as part of the family. There was something about his personality that irritated our father. Just my suggestion, that's why it meant everything to her. Damn it, I added. I'll even cover the moving costs and pay for the house you need to buy if you say yes. Tom was stunned. He didn't know what to say. The company he worked for always provided advice and handled cases for others. Of course, he made good money, but he knew that James would pay him the same as John earned, which was much more. Connie looked at her husband and said, "Just don't stand there, say something." Tom walked to the edge of the bed and extended his hand to me. I accepted it, and as we hugged, he said, "I would be honored to come on board." Mom was delighted. Her only daughter was moving home. After they left, I called Carl and told him what my plans were for the future. I learned that the company's assets and contracts we were involved in were supported by some in the state capitol. Carl believed that they had done a lot of retribution under the table. I made it clear that if the court accepted our proposal, the name would change and everything connected with it would have to be done quickly. I was released on Friday. My mother came to pick me up and took me home so I could finish packing and pick up the car. In the morning, Connie will fly in and start looking for a house. My body began to heal. My divorce lawyer, upon learning that I had been beaten, obtained a restraining order against both Beth and John. Relatives came to visit 3 times. It was a quiet 3 days, Mom said. I'm glad because it gave the girls time to adjust. It's been a long time since I've had to explain the difference between the choices people make and the consequences that come with them. How are my daughters emotionally? I asked. They handle it better than I could, she said. However, they will both need time alone with you alone. Then they'll spend the whole weekend with me if that's what it takes, I said. Before I get home, I'm going to stop and pick up some supplies at the drive-thru so Bree can start teaching her students. Tom filed his notice and completed his assessment of the company, Mom said. Connie will bring the report and invoice from her company. He was offered a huge salary in an attempt to keep him, but he flatly refused, saying his sign-on bonus was a brand new house. Mom, Tom has the knowledge needed to smoothly manage this big growth, I said. Besides, his involvement in the family business is long overdue. If you thought so, why wasn't it done earlier? Mom asked. I couldn't do it. The president wouldn't approve of it, I said. Finally, we reached my house. I got out of the car, thanked her, and headed inside. Opening the front door, I grabbed the mail. In the trash pile was a letter from Beth. After reading this, I threw it in the trash. It was too late, and I didn't believe any of it. How can you regret something that was done on purpose? I called the cleaning service and arranged for them to pick up all the food, clean the room, turn off the water, and all the equipment. I gave them the access code to disable the alarm and told them I would leave the key in about 2 hours. It took me about an hour to collect all my clothes and personal belongings. Before leaving, I decided to shave some parts of my face. It was time to change my appearance, so I left the height for a beautiful mustache and goatee. David called me and told me that they had just raided John's house and confiscated his computer. John's lawyer negotiated, trying to get the charges reduced due to his guilty plea. When I arrived, my daughters had already returned from school to their mother. They both helped me gather and put away the rest of my clothes. After that, the three of us just lay on the double bed and cuddled while we chatted for a very long time. One of the things that came to mind was talking to them about sex. I said, "When you have sex for sexual purposes, it is mainly to satisfy your own animal needs. When you make love, you put the needs and satisfaction of the other first. By doing this, you strengthen your physical and emotional connection with your significant other." "What brought Uncle John and Mom together?" asked Bidge. "Was it love or just sexual attraction that they felt for each other?" "Your uncle wanted what I wanted," I said. "Instead of suppressing it, he allowed it to grow until it forced him to act on it. Your mother may have been depressed by him at first, but found herself attracted to his animal nature. Over time, this desire forced them into long-term relationships that required them to lie and deceive everyone around them." I was worried it might sound complicated, but was surprised when Bree said, "Essentially, they each bought what the other was advertising instead of having enough morals to walk away." "What do you mean?" asked Bidge. "My red dress that you want so much," Bree said. "I keep making fun of you because I know you want it." That's exactly what Mom and Uncle John did. Instead of wearing a red dress, they used their looks to mock each other. Bree then stood up and left the room. When she returned, she had the red dress that Bidge wanted. Passing it on to her sister, she said, "What I did was just as wrong as they were, but to a different degree. Sorry, sister, the dress is yours." With that, I got out of bed, opened the top drawer of my dresser, grabbed the booklet, and said as I tossed it to Bree, "You better start studying this because you can have your students in 3 months." Bree squealed with delight, "Thank you, Daddy." My girls have grown up. They both learned a very important concept in life, and I was very proud of them. Mom asked the kids what they wanted for dinner, and they said macaroni and cheese. It was a lot of fun when we were served the old-fashioned version baked in the oven, along with a very tasty pork chop and baked beans. After dinner, knowing that I was still weak and still recovering, I stopped working and went to bed early. Connie came home with a wonderful gift for me that I really appreciated. In the evenings at home, she prepared a proposal for bankruptcy court, and all she needed was my signature for it to be sent. If it is approved, we will get 123 new seats and double our size. Carl and I reviewed it Monday morning and discussed the pros and cons. After signing, I asked Joanna to scan it for our records. She sent it to the state capitol, where the bankruptcy judge handling the case was discovered by courier that same day. As soon as he was picked up, she came in to inform me of this fact. As she was heading back, I said, "Joanna, I told the accounting department that you are now receiving a salary of $70,000 a year, starting with the current pay period. I told them that your position is now considered junior executive." It was a real pleasure to see Joanna's eyes water with pure joy. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Joanna came into my office and closed the door. "James, we need to talk in private." She said, "David wanted to let you know what's going on, so he's using me as a messenger." I stopped what I was doing, stood up, and walked over to the table. Moving one of the chairs, I sat directly opposite her. "You have my undivided attention," I said. She spoke about the progress of the investigation. "It doesn't surprise me," I said. "This indicates a pattern of behavior that David believes can be used in your divorce," Joan explained. "With what we've learned about John since his removal from the company," I said, "I won't have any problem with it. The problem is how." "David will have to write a formal internal report," Joan explained. "The decision on what to do with the information will be up to the district attorney. David will bring home a copy on disk, which I will give to you." "That sounds good to me, and tell David I owe him one," I said. "When I called David to tell him what you had done, he was shocked by your generosity. We both know that was one hell of a raise. Mary was also rewarded, I said. Although not as generous as you, as Carl's assistant, she is now junior management. Connie's husband joins us as our first CFO. I want Mary and you to find the most qualified assistant, one of our current employees, who you feel is best suited for the two of you. Once you select him, the three of us will sit down with him and explain his new responsibilities if he agrees to be part of the management team. We will use the empty cabinets where John's former office furniture is stored for them. You really make a difference, she said. Why? Very soon we could double in size and become a statewide company. There will be days when senior management will be busy or out of the office, I explained. As our executive assistants, you three, once fully equipped and trained, will make decisions on our behalf. So we better make sure we can trust whoever we choose, she said. How you trust us. Any problems concerning Mary and the new assistant will be part of your new responsibility. They will contact you, I said. If you can't solve them, remember that you can always ask for my advice. Joan walked out of the office with the proudest smile I've ever seen. When I left for the day, Mary and Joan were in deep discussion. When Carl and I came out together, Carl said that the new structure we were creating was brilliant. Mary and I are starting to make plans in case our proposal is accepted, Carl said. The HR department is compiling a list of those who should be considered for relocation and promotion to new positions that will be created. It's a good thing I added a 20-day notice before acceptance so we have a chance to prepare, I said. Connie's husband, Tom, joins us as our CFO. Without his funding arrangements, we would not have been able to consider this. John will be offered a repurchase of his shares later this week. What happens to divorce? Asked Carl. We have a court hearing this week about getting an order for a blood test, I said. We were the last ones called before the judge on Friday. I was surprised to learn that Judge Donald McDonald was not a huge man. From his reputation, I assumed that he was tall and broad-shouldered, but in fact he was about 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed about 180 pounds, with a very small neck and broad shoulders. He looked over 50 years old. My lawyer laid out the basic attitude of the three of us, explaining how Beth and I reconnected. She detailed how I found out who she fell in love with and my brother's denial of it when I confronted him. She then submitted an affidavit from my mother stating that Beth had admitted to her that this had been going on for 2 years. She then played the camera footage from David. Judge McDonald took a special interest in her. Finally, I was called in to explain what I had learned the day Beth accused me of kidnapping her own children. I saw the judge's face become more and more worried. When I told him what Beth had said when I ran into her the day we reconnected, his face went pale. For a moment, he looked really old. Beth's lawyer tried to explain all of this and honestly tried to refute our perceptions. Finally, the judge spoke. It is clear that there is sufficient circumstantial evidence to suggest that Beth and John Tate had a sexual relationship longer than the marriage between Beth and James Tate lasted. This means that one brother could try to pass off his paternity to the other. This clearly suggests that there is a 50-50 chance that either one or the other could be the father. The only way to know the true paternity of the children, because human nature is such that our memories change over time, is to conduct a DNA comparison of both possible fathers of the children in question, the judge continued. Regarding John Tate's video confession and his reaction, that is a significant factor in making this decision. When all matters have been resolved, a divorce will be granted to James Tate on the grounds of adultery. Beth was devastated. John looked at me with pure rage. Although the judge didn't say it outright, he implied that they had been manipulating me my entire life. I had a big, satisfied smile on my face. As we prepared to leave, we all noticed Beth's parents and her older brother standing and preparing to leave the courtroom. I could see the pain and sadness in their eyes. They were there throughout the entire hearing. I guess Beth's parents were hoping we were all wrong in our thinking. Beth started walking towards them. They turned their backs to her and walked out the door. We all understood the message they just gave to Beth because of their religious views. From this day forward, she will be banished. In today's society, she was a walking dead man. I walked up to Beth with my lawyer next to me. Beth, you should be extremely proud of yourself. Not many people can say they destroyed 2 families in less than a month, I said. I'm sure you'll be pleased to know that Bijou and Bree are doing well. The lawyer and I continued on our way, and Beth began to sob. When we left, Beth's parents were waiting for me. Mom, Dad, do you want to take the girls for the weekend? I asked. This will give them a chance to spend time with their favorite uncle. Mom shed tears and hugged me, saying, we would love to. Ted, Beth's brother, extended his hand and said, good to see you, old friend. If my daughters don't bore you tomorrow, I said, shaking his hand, let's have a late dinner and a few beers. I'm coming home for good, James, he said. I'm too old to keep up with the young people. 20 years is enough. So I returned home with my family for a couple of weeks to look for a house and a job. Then my phone rang. It was Joan, so I answered saying, what happened? We just received word that the 30-day countdown has begun, Joan said with excitement. Thank you, and let Carl know that I just found the head of our HR department, I said. If, of course, I can convince him to join us. How did the divorce meeting go? Joan asked. I'll explain when I get back to the office, I said. Goodbye. Ted, $60,000 a year to start until you prove yourself, and a review after the first 6 months as head of the new parish electrical HR department, I said. Want? What will this include? Ted asked. Procurement and distribution management and inventory control for 3 distribution hubs to our retail stores and commercial sites that we operate. Most residential projects are carried out through our retail outlets, and our supply contracts are carried out from one of the hubs, I explained. Damn it, are you serious? He said. Of course I'll take it. James, Beth's father said, take him to see your house. If he's interested, I'll cover his down payment. That's what we did. Since he spent most of his time abroad, most of what they had there would be sold before the move. They will start practically from scratch. After touring the house with his wife and finding out what was going with it, they decided to write a full price offer. I went with them and accepted their offer. All it took was Beth's signature. Ted couldn't believe how easy it would be for them to start over. I stopped at a liquor store and bought 2 bottles of wine and a block of cheese and an assortment of crackers before heading back to the office. 4 of the senior management team held a small celebration before calling it a day. My girls called me to ask if they could go with their grandparents for the weekend. I pretended to be surprised, but said, go and have fun. When I got back to my mom, I told her what I did after the trial that afternoon. She said, Ted is getting a good deal. The goods you sell in this house are worth more than they pay for it. Trust me, they know that you suit them better than they could ever dream of. Ted is family, despite what Beth did, I said. He'll pay me back in spades, keeping a close eye on every penny. Once again, you choose the high road, said my mother. Your father would be proud, as would I. Thank you, Mom. It means a lot, especially since I'm still suffering, I said, because I still love her. Oh, that reminds me, John sold the shares back to me this morning, Mom said, for $5 million through my personal lawyer, so I guess I'll stay on the board. What motivated him to do this? I asked. He told my lawyer that he was never happy in this industry. It stayed because it belonged to the family, my mother explained. As soon as the divorce is finalized, they will move to Florida because he is going to get into real estate. He has a lot of land there that he is going to develop. I smiled because John would never know that our business was worth over $40 million at current market value according to Tom's report. Using this report, we secured $15 million, of which 10 were spent in purchasing assets and contracts in the North for 10 cents on the dollar. Tom, reviewing their assets, believed we could recover about $7 million after streamlining operations by getting rid of their head office, 4 redundant warehouse centers, and excess vehicles. It will cost a couple million to repaint a commercial fleet and rebrand it. Using retail locations like we do here will allow us to use local independent contractors. The motivations that kept them working with us were based on their performance and the quality of service they provide to our clients. On Christmas Eve, all independent contractors received a Christmas bonus equal to 10% of the income they generated tax-free. We learned many years ago that our customer service improved, employee complaints decreased, and customer satisfaction increased significantly. My mom dragged me out to one of the obligatory social events on Saturday afternoon. I thought it was going to be one hell of a boring day. It was a fundraiser for the family who were raising money to cover a huge medical bill for their daughter's cancer treatment. It was there that I met Dr. Tamara Braden, their physician. I wasn't looking for anything, but she definitely caught my attention. I called our accountant and asked for his approval to donate $50,000 to cover the debt since the girl's ongoing treatments were completed and she was cured. It took him an hour to write the check, take it to the hospital's billing department, and apply it directly to their account. Tamara and I were both going through divorce, so we had a lot to discuss. We've both experienced betrayal. She didn't have children, but she wasn't surprised when I said my daughters were teenagers. I had just turned 40, she didn't say her age, but I guessed she was about 32. When the accountant brought me a receipt confirming that the bill had been paid in full, I took it and walked to the center of the room. Having everyone's attention, I said, "To the Johnston family, I would like to give this receipt saying that the debt has been paid. Parish Electrical became aware of your situation and covered the co-payment in full on your behalf. The organization prays that it never comes back." Tamara came up to me and whispered, "I'm so impressed that I'm taking you home for dinner." I laughed and said, "Then you'll have to take me home after, because I came here with my mom and she's my ride home." She laughed and said, "You can't be serious." "There's my mom right there," I said, pointing to her, "the one who glows with pride." "Oh, you mean Ruth? She's one of our biggest supporters," Tamara said. "She always helps those she can." "I bet you didn't know her maiden name was Parrish," I said. "Our company is named after her." Tamara smiled and said, "What was wrong with the woman who is divorcing you?" "She got involved with a man who really has no morals," I said. "It's sad because they're both going under because of this." "Tamara, we made it. Sorry we took so long," Ted's wife said as she approached us. "I have great news. I can start working earlier if necessary. I'm not going back with Ted. The children and I are staying here." "James, what are you doing here?" "Jackie, I was just talking to Tamara," I said. "My mom is right there, watching me like a hawk." "How do you know James?" Tamara asked Jackie. "He's divorcing my sister-in-law," she said, "and he's going to be Ted's new boss. He gave us a great deal on his old house." "Why?" Tamara asked. "Despite what Beth did," I said, "Ted will always be family." "If you need furniture," Tamara said, "I have a few things you can take." "The only thing that didn't come with the house was the kids' bedroom furniture," Jackie said. "Ted's parents bought it for us this morning after confirming the sale when Beth signed the agreement." Ted and I left the ladies talking and went. I talked to Beth a little bit. "She is suffering a lot. She's depressed," he said. "I told her that she herself is to blame for this, but everyone else is suffering too, even your daughters, because no one can understand why you did it, not even yourself." "Ted, she doesn't know that things are going to get worse for her before they get better," I said, "because of John's past behavior being very public. A word of advice, be careful with Tamara. She is a beautiful woman who suffers just like you," Ted said. "She was always a good choice." Tamara came up and took my hand, saying, "Come on, I promised you dinner and we need to go shopping." Mom watched us leave. Tamara handed me the keys and asked me to take her to Food City, a small independent grocery store known for having the best selection of meats in the area. She asked me to wait, but I said no, so we went together. "What's for dinner?" I asked. "Grilled steak, salad, and if you have room for dessert," Tamara said. "This is fine." "Sounds good," I replied. We'd better take a couple of bottles of red wine to go with it, I said. It was already after midnight when I returned home. Tamara and I had a wonderful evening together. We agreed to meet next Saturday. For some reason, I slept well for the first time in a long time since Beth left our marriage. Mom dragged me to church on Sunday. Connie finally found and made an offer on the house she wanted. I told her to submit a copy of the purchase agreement to the accounting department if it was accepted so they could write a check. The girls met their mother at the mall for lunch. They told me later that everything did not go very well. First, they told her that I had met someone and hoped that this woman would help me start to get better. My mom called them and told them about my first date. They then told her what they found on John's computer. This was the first time Beth had heard about it. Beth was devastated because she knew she would not be able to have sole custody of our daughters. The girls believed that their mother became depressed. At this time, the district attorney had just filed several charges against my brother. He was arrested the next day at his home in front of Beth. The moment he was taken into custody, Beth knew she would never be allowed to gain custody of her children. What her divorce lawyer wrote in the original lawsuit was becoming reality. Not for James, but for her, because she allowed herself to fall with someone who was the complete opposite of James. A little over 2 months have passed since we met Tamara. John was released on bail. Beth's lawyers and I worked out all the financial details. She'll get $4 million, and that's it. She won't get any of my shares. DNA tests confirmed that Bijou and Bree are my biological daughters. Even Beth seemed relieved. We agreed that I would have sole custody, but Beth would be allowed extensive visitation and contact with the children, as long as it was not in John's presence. The amount of money I gave her, if properly invested, would allow Beth to have a quality of life if John did serve time. I provided her with the names of 2 investment advisors she would work with once the divorce was finalized. Connie and Tom returned with the children, much to my mother's delight. She got to know Connie's children better, and it was a real blessing for her. Mom said her life was filled with more love than what she lost. I saw the truth in these words. My mother, my sister, and I decided that Connie would remain CEO, to Tom's delight. John's reputation was completely destroyed. Even those whom he considered his lifelong friends turned their backs on him. His legal expenses were mounting. My daughters believed that once our divorce was finalized, their mother would leave him. The cost of a real relationship with him was too great for her. They were concerned about their mother's depression. The takeover was moving forward quite well. Contracts that fell behind due to bankruptcy were adjusted and were now ahead of schedule. Most will end up significantly cheaper than the agreed-upon price. We decided to refund everyone 10% after receiving the final payment. We have reduced projected labor and related costs by 50% since the acquisition. I flew to see some of the changes that were being made and some of the new buildings and lands that we became the owners of. The surplus ones were put up for sale at their appraised value. The HR department, working with former employees, arranged for more than half of them to become contractors working from our new retail locations. We provided them with interest-free loans to purchase the trucks and equipment they needed from us at wholesale prices. Part of the package they came with included accounting software from QuickBooks. Ted, in his first major purchase, due to the increased volume we needed and his skillful negotiation, reduced the cost per unit by 20%. He began to reorganize our entire approach, which will significantly reduce our processing costs when fully completed. He proved that I made the right choice. Jackie and he were very happy with their new home. They slowly made changes to the decor to make it their own. Senior management was delighted because by the time it was completed, our allowance for write-offs and losses had been reduced by 2/3. We learned that those in the state capital wanted the bankruptcy to be resolved as quickly and quietly as possible, which confirmed our thoughts that there were large kickbacks for some of these contracts. We were the first and only offer. We all believed that those in power wanted to make sure that certain things remained hidden. Tom hired his old firm to do a new valuation because our growth was enormous. Mom and I were getting ready for a big barbecue at Mom's house this Saturday. I was a ball of nerves because this would be the first time most people would meet Tamara. All the senior management and their families came, also all of Beth's and mine's relatives. I left to pick up Tamara because I wanted her to meet my daughters before the rest of the crowd arrived. Although it was an informal event, Tamara decided to wear a dress that accentuated her figure in a flattering light. She really looked amazing. With her red hair flowing over her shoulders and a white dress with hand-embroidered monarch butterflies on the sides, she was dazzling. Tamara was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed less than 120 pounds, but she was energetic. We exchanged a few kisses before heading off. We walked into Mom's yard holding hands. Bijou and Bree came over immediately. Tamara must have sensed my nervousness because she said, "Relax." After the meeting, Bijou told her, "If you are my dad's friend, he definitely made the right choice." I could see how Tamara changed at that moment. I leaned over and whispered, "You were just as nervous as I was." Tamara admitted that this was true. The party turned out to be a great success. Between my two mothers, sisters, and their daughters, they quickly made Tamara feel at home. Tamara found out more about me than I was ready for her to know. When Ted and I went to grab a cold beer, he said, "Looks like you two are starting to fall in love. Mom and Dad will be babysitting, so how about we go to Bythea's on Bythea and dance?" "Sounds good," I said. David and I had a brief moment, and he said that the Da believed John would get at least 7 years. "Joan thinks Tamara is the best thing that's happened to you in a long time, but she's afraid you'll ruin it," David said. I told her why women always think it's the man's fault. Mom opened the pool, so Tamara and I sat on sun loungers, watching those who decided to swim. I didn't like how much skin my daughter's swimsuits showed. This was probably obvious. Tamara said, "You are really old-fashioned in your values. Was your father the same?" I thought about it for a moment before saying, "Yeah, I guess he really was. He wanted us to be the best we could be and always emphasized that the way we walk, talk, and behave says more about us than our own words. Unfortunately, that's what led Beth to do what she did. If my first husband had been like you, we would still be together," Tamara said. We looked at each other without saying a word before sharing a kiss. I think we both realized that our relationship had become serious. Bree, sticking her head out of the water, said jokingly, "Chill, Dad, she's not our new mom yet." My daughter broke the mood. I took off my socks and shoes, made sure my keys and wallet were hidden in them, and ran into the pool to catch her. Tamara watched me play with my daughters for about an hour before I went out to change my clothes. When I returned, the three of them were chatting pleasantly. Both girls took several photos with their phones. They made the mistake of sending a few of them to their mother, letting her know they were serious. The food the staff prepared was excellent. Tamara was interested that I went into the kitchen to thank them for their excellent work. Everyone noticed that we were not separated. We met Ted and Jackie at an Irish restaurant and bar. Tamara was a client of the owner's wife. We danced until closing. I really enjoyed it. I walked Tamara to her door and was invited inside. Tamara and I stopped at home so I could change and went shopping before Mom and the girls returned from church. We were all expected at Mom's for a family dinner on Sunday evening. Everyone was wondering where I was. Out of despair, my daughter wrote to me, "Where are you? We are waiting." About 2 minutes later, Tamara and I walked through the door. Bijou said, "Finally, dinner is almost ready. Dad, you have some explaining to do because you didn't come home last night." I couldn't help but smile. This caught the attention of my sister and my mother. I asked the staff to bring 2 bottles of champagne and glasses for everyone. Tamara held her hands behind her back. My mother realized what was happening. A big smile appeared on her face. When everyone was served, I said, "Tamara and I got engaged this afternoon." And then real chaos began in my mother's house. Tamara proudly showed everyone her huge diamond ring. Bree recorded my announcement and sent a copy to her mother. That night, their mother took a large amount of sleeping pills and went to bed. In her depression, she couldn't cope with the fact that I had moved on in life. She never woke up again. We later learned that John and Beth blamed each other for all the problems they had in their lives. Both realized that they didn't have love, it was desire, and they confused themselves because of it. Everyone took it hard. John and I stood at Beth's grave, exchanging a few words for the last time in our lives. He said, "Sorry about everything." I told him I didn't believe him because he couldn't apologize for one thing in particular, and I left. That night John took his favorite weapon, the first one our father bought for him. After drinking 3/4 of a bottle of Jack Daniels, he passed away. On the table next to him were written 2 words, "Sorry." It was the week before Labor Day. I was sitting in my office going through a few things when Carl, Tom, Mary, Joan, and Lucy came in carrying a huge cake, glasses, and champagne. I looked up and asked, "What are we celebrating?" "We paid off the loan in full," Tom said. "Because of the huge expansion, we are debt-free again." "Thank God," I said. "I never want those 6 months to happen again." "It wasn't that bad," Tom said. "I look forward to being your best man in 8 days." "But I never want to hear you say," I said, "that we were forced to get married." Everyone laughed because they knew that Tamara was 2 months pregnant. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.